Hello, New Covenant Community Church. Today we're going to continue our devotional series in 2 Corinthians chapter 4 by looking at 2 Corinthians 4, 7 through 12. And up to this point, Paul has been talking to the church in Corinth about the law in the life of the Christian in 2 Corinthians chapter 3, because you've got these teachers coming in and they're urging them to keep the law, and he's trying to help them to understand what life in Christ looks like and how to understand the Old Testament law in light of the gospel. And he's talked about that throughout chapter 3, and at the beginning of chapter 4, he says, we didn't present the gospel to you, we didn't present the mercy to God to you in an underhanded or deceitful way. And he's talking about the light of the glory of the gospel of Christ, who is the image of God, that they've come to proclaim. And as he's talking about that, he's going to continue his conversation in chapter 4, verse 7. And he says, but we have this treasure in jars of clay to show that the surpassing power belongs to God and not to us. So all of the power of the gospel and godly things belongs to God and not to us. We are afflicted in every way, but not crushed, perplexed, but not driven to despair, persecuted but not forsaken, struck down but not destroyed, always carrying in the body, so in their bodies, in their ministry, the death of Jesus, so that the life of Jesus may also be manifested in our bodies. So he's just talking about this ministry that they have, this proclamation of the gospel that they have, and this treasure in jars of clay is kind of their frail human vessels, right? The bodies that they are in. And he says, no matter how much affliction we have, and he talked about affliction a lot in the first two chapters, affliction and comfort. We are afflicted in every way. And then but not crushed, perplexed, right? Another word for afflicted, but not driven to despair, persecuted, but not forsaken, struck down, but not destroyed. So that's the reality that Paul is saying he lives in, and that they're carrying in the body the death of Jesus. They feel the weight of this, so that the life of Jesus may also be manifested in our body. So they live for Jesus and his resurrection, the life of Jesus, I think he's referring to the resurrection there, may be manifested in this. And he's, again, talked about this in the previous paragraph, in the way that they present the gospel of the glory of Christ, who is the image of God, and how they are servants of this. So here he's really just describing what it looks like to be a servant of Christ for the gospel. What does it look like to be a servant of Christ for the gospel? Well, understanding the frailty that we have, but that the power belongs to God. Understanding that we may be perplexed or persecuted or struck down, but that's not the end of the story. We're not despairing. We trust in God. For we who live are always being given over to death for Jesus' sake, so that the life of Jesus also may be manifested in our mortal flesh. So he's used the idea of, he's talking about mortal flesh, carrying in the body, these jars of clay. He's kind of coming back to their weakness in the way that they present the gospel, and the vessels that they have, the comfort and affliction that they have in doing that. So the life of Jesus is always presented in our mortal bodies. So death is at work in us, but life in you. So to be a servant of Christ, right, he's saying we are ministering, and we are persecuted, we are struck down, we are perplexed, all of these things, but we're not destroyed or forsaken. That's what ministry and being a servant of Christ looks like. And Paul's going to continue on this theme in the very next paragraph, which we will see next time. But I hope that as you are thinking about yourself as a servant of Christ, and as he's going to talk about in chapter 5, ambassadors for Christ, that we would see the beauty and the wonder of the gospel at work in us.